Hi guys, this is gsn1.com and I'm here with a review of the OPPO Reno8 Pro, known for its particular design, especially if you look at the camera area. Now we're dealing here with a high mid-range handset, one that comes at a price of around $700 to $800, and it's supposed to fight anything between the OnePlus Nord 2T and the Realme GT Neo 3. Also, it's supposed to also fight some flagships on account of having a very powerful MediaTek CPU inside. It's actually the Dimensity 8100 Max, and we also get a large screen with a large refresh rate. Plus, we have here some pretty impressive cameras, but more impressive is the Silicon chip, which helps with the image processing. We've seen it previously on the OPPO X5 Pro. There's also fast charging at 80 watts and some other extras, including the famous bokeh flare, made, well, famous by its predecessor, the OPPO Reno6 Pro. So let's get started with the review. First of all, the OPPO Reno6 Pro is made of premium materials. There is glass at the back side. There is a metal frame, in this case aluminum. Yes, I know the frame looks a lot like the iPhone 1, everybody realizes that. And aside from this, once again, glass at the back, glass at the front, and aluminum frame. It's quite a slim phone at 7.3 millimeters in thickness and weighs a decent 183 grams. I'm saying decent for such a large diagonal. 6.7 inches is definitely not a small diagonal. I enjoy the fact that we have narrow bezels. The build is quite solid, but I have mixed feelings about the backside. Reminds me of the Galaxy S21 Ultra, combined a bit with the slopes of the OPPO Find X3 Pro and the OPPO Find X5 Pro. Aside from this green hue, the phone also comes in a black version and a special one, the House of Dragon version, related to the Game of Thrones series from HBO. Once again, pretty well built, but also rather slippery, and it's at the same time very wide and very long, so the people with small hands will definitely have a hard time adjusting to it. Now, as far as the screen is concerned, what we got here is a 6.7-inch AMOLED with 120Hz refresh rate, Full HD Plus resolution, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, and also applied on top of it we have a plastic protection from the factory. Now, there's also HDR10 Plus, just so you know, and it shows 1 billion colors. Now, as far as the viewing experience is concerned, it's a pretty immersive panel, even though I feel that the punch hole here for the selfie camera is a bit too large for my tastes. It's also rather bright. There is a large color palette here. We have wide view angles, and the contrast is solid even in full sunlight, so I'm generally happy with the panel chosen here. It has a pentile matrix pixel arrangement, and when it came to the brightness, we did a bunch of tests, so let's see what came out of that. Okay, so first things first, we have here the brightness test. We achieved 667 lux units, which is actually above the flagship OPPO Find X5 Pro, as well as above the Motorola Edge 30 and the Xiaomi 12 Pro. It's below the Galaxy S22 Plus and below the Honor Magic 4 Pro, plus even its predecessor, the OPPO Reno6 Pro, which had 700 lux. Now, aside from that, we go further and we find the CPU here, one of the most powerful MediaTek CPUs available in Eastern Europe, where I'm from, MediaTek Dimensity 8100 Max. This chipset is a 5nm unit, octa-core, with a Mali G610 MC6 GPU. It's also present on quite a few other phones: OPPO Reno9 Pro, Xiaomi 12T, Honor 70 Pro, Realme GT Neo 3, and it's accompanied in the current case by 8 GB of LPDDR5 RAM, 256 GB of storage, UFS 3.1. There's also a version with 12 GB of RAM. It can run any games you want, from Diablo Immortal to Genshin Impact, and of course Apex Legends. Now, when it comes to the benchmarks, we have those here, so I think it's time to actually start discussing them. In Antutu 9, this is what we achieved. We surpassed the Google Pixel 7 Pro, the Realme GT Neo 3T, and the OnePlus Nord 2T. We're below the Realme GT Neo 3 150 watts and below the POCO X4 GT. In Geekbench 5, perhaps more relevant and more famous on account of it not being banned, like Antutu is in some parts of the world. Okay, so here in Geekbench 5 multi-core, we're just above the Nubia Red Magic 6 Pro, which is a gaming phone, so that's pretty high praise. It also beats a flagship, a fall flagship, Vivo X80 Pro and the Galaxy S22 Plus. Still, we are below the Xiaomi 12 and OnePlus 9 Pro. By the way, the score here is the exact equal of the POCO X4 GT. Okay, so moving further, we can talk about the graphics courtesy of the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme benchmark, which we have here. It's just above the Motorola Moto G200 and the POCO X4 GT, also beating the flagship Huawei P50 Pro. With this score here, we were below the Realme GT Neo 3 once again, and I would say also below the Galaxy S21 Fan Edition. It's flagship level in some tests, and it's definitely keeping up with famous mid-rangers, high mid-rangers I mean. At the same time, I'm pretty impressed by the fact that it never gets hot. Check it out, we only achieved 29.2 degrees Celsius in the toughest of benchmarks. Color me impressed. As far as the battery goes, as you can see here, it's a 4500 mAh unit. Guess what? The last Reno we tested, the Reno 6 Pro, similar capacity. However, this time we have 80 watts wired charging and also reverse wire charging. Sadly, no love for wireless charging this time around. I actually appreciate how much video playback time we achieved here, 18 hours and 58 minutes. Good enough for a lot of binging, particularly since Wednesday is available on Netflix. Well, we surpassed the Realme GT Neo 3, 150 watts. We surpassed Motorola Edge 30 Pro and the Galaxy S21 Fan Edition with this value. We scored below the OnePlus Nord 2T and the OnePlus 10 Plus. Why did I mention those models? Because the prices are, I would say, pretty similar. The continuous usage was a bit of a letdown, just 10 hours and 20 minutes, pretty shy of what I expected. It could be the fact that by default the phone is sold to you with 120Hz refresh rate activated. It's above the Honor Magic 4 Pro and the Huawei Nova 10 Pro, also the Xiaomi 12 Pro, but inferior to the predecessor Reno 6 Pro by 2 hours. Also inferior to the Realme GT Neo 3 150 watt. At least the charging is spot on, it only requires 39 minutes to go from 0 to 100%. And after just a quarter of an hour, you are at 57%, which is pretty solid. There are also power saving modes and super power saving modes here. And now we move further to acoustics. This is speaker number 1. We don't have a speaker here at the top. We have the earpiece to complete it here in a very narrow slit. We don't have an audio jack, and the experience, well, you're going to hear it for yourself. Okay, so you get the idea. We have a pretty strong bass and nice voices here, but the mids and the highs get a bit muddy when you turn it all the way up. Especially if you're listening to metal music, you notice some muddiness when you turn the volume up. Stick to 80%. Once again, bass is fine and voices are fine. Pay attention to the noisy mids and highs. We also have tests here regarding the volume. We used an acoustic sample and measured 80.8 decibels at the top speaker, the earpiece, while the bottom one achieved 86.9, which is a solid result. Superior to the Xiaomi 12T Pro and POCO X4 GT, inferior to the OPPO Reno6 Pro predecessor and the OnePlus 9. Now, it's also the equal of the Motorola Edge 30 Pro, just so you know. When it comes to gaming, 96.9 achieved in the game Asphalt 9 with all the police around us and the music, hip-hop and all that, and nitros. So 96.9 expected a bit better, to be honest, and actually my ears perceived it as louder. Above the Xiaomi 12 and Galaxy S21 Fan Edition, below Motorola Edge 30 Pro and Realme GT Neo 3 150 watts. Camera-wise, you can definitely see the cutout here for the selfie camera. It's a 32 megapixel shooter with autofocus and also 2x zoom, which is a bit of a shock, a surprising feature, which honestly I've seen on a few other phones recently. At the backside, generous lenses and ring flash here, but also the Mari silicone chip, which helps with the processing. The main camera is a 50 megapixel unit. This one has f1.8 aperture, omnidirectional focus, and a Sony IMX766 sensor present on probably 20 flagships over the past 2 years. Then comes the ultra-wide 8 megapixel camera with f2.2 aperture and 112 degrees, and this small shooter 2 megapixel macro. This is the LED flash. We have 4K 30 frames per second. We don't have the optical image stabilization. And by the way, the selfie camera is borrowed directly from the OPPO Find X5 Pro. The Mari Silicon NPU here is an imaging chip with 20 bits of dynamic range, HDR fusion, supposed to offer 42% better dynamic range compared to its predecessor. We have AI scene detection, we have bokeh flare, and a few other modes like the tripod for the night mode, and the gallery of photos is available right here. We've taken quite a few shots actually 362. The days were very cold in early December, so a bit of drizzle was also present, so be advised. Okay, so let's get going. First of all, I'm going to start with some colorful daytime shots if possible. So it was a pretty dark and murky day, and I would say that the colors are pretty well bleak and at the same time pretty cold. Now, things worth mentioning: the ultra-wide camera is weak, as it usually happens when you're using an 8 megapixel shooter. The image is a bit darker compared to the main camera, and the details they aren't impressive if you look especially at the leaves of the trees and try to spot them, as I do here. There's a lot of noise. Of course, the zoom isn't much to see because you don't have a telephoto camera, but at 2x, it's actually pretty impressive what we achieved here. If you go at 3x and so, you won't be that impressed. Okay, so following up here, I captured some grass here. It wasn't this green, so the camera deforms the color calibration here. The green was much more subdued than you see here. This is a too intense phosphorescent and cyan version of the green I perceived with my own two eyes. So keep that in mind. Next up, my usual test, the close-up and the macros. The close-ups were fine by me, but when it comes to the macros, they're a bit underwhelming on account of the low resolution of the, well, macro camera. So stick to close-ups. Speaking of which, you can trigger some pretty nice textures here. Look at the water drops I captured on this little horse's head. You can definitely see them here. I know it's a cliche and I keep repeating that in reviews. If you have a solid main camera who takes nice close-ups, why bother with 2 megapixel macros at all? Nice texture of the sand here and a beautiful level of details. You can clearly tell we're using a flagship main camera, and the colors were pretty satisfying. I particularly enjoyed the blues and the greens and also the yellows, even though the green I saw before for the vegetation was once again underwhelming. So leave aside the greens, the yellows and the blues are the stars here. Also not a bad red, a bit too intense compared to the real thing. Okay, a bunch of selfies. I simply cannot understand why my face is so white. It happened more than once, and there's a tendency to make the face too white in the shots. You can clearly see that in the thumbnails. It's unnaturally white. By the way, this is the bokeh flare effect. You can see the sources of light behind me being all lit up like a Christmas ad. Okay, going forward, we have more colorful shots here. I mean, the photos are fine, but if you're paying $700 or $800 for a phone, I think you're expecting a bit more, and somehow I was a bit more impressed by the Nothing Phone 1, Honor 70 and OnePlus Nord 2T. And some selfies, this time without the cap on, without the hat on. The texture of the hair is decent, but I've seen better on other phones. The focus is spot on, nice texture, and I also spotted some pores here and there, but also some missed shots. The core remains those extra features like the AI color portrait, where your all colorful and black and white is applied behind you, and of course those beautiful bokeh flare effects which you can apply not only with the front camera but also the back camera, triggering some very good looking portrait bokeh shots with a very nice subject separation. And even more colorful stuff, some thematic stuff. Since Christmas is coming, we have a Santa here in a beautiful bright red, and a Christmas tree as well. Even though it's a bit darker, it was a cloudier day about 2 hours before sunset, and you can actually see the difference between main camera and ultra-wide camera, which is a bit bleaker and darker. That's about it, and this is where I'm applying the bokeh flare. You can see the tree lights shining behind me. It's actually the good time of the year to keep applying it. In a nutshell, I would place this camera between the Motorola H30 and below the Honor 70 and Nothing Phone 1. Pretty close to Nothing Phone 1, honestly, even though the ultra-wide camera and the macro camera are a bit of a bummer for me. Now, let's see the nighttime capture. If you're planning to take photos without the night mode, well, don't. Stick to the night mode. You can see that there are problems with the ultra-wide camera. Each street light source becomes a little sun. The selfies are a bit too noisy and too ethereal for me. You have a pre-applied flash, the screen lights up with a bright white light. And once again, the street lights are a bit too big for my liking, especially here. This is one example where they become suns of their own. This is one of the better shots, a building facade in regular mode, night mode, and also ultra-wide mode, which is actually not bad as far as ultra-wide is concerned, but the scenery also helped it. Some of the best shots I've taken are with the entrance of this restaurant here, where the night mode definitely smoothed out the texture of these flowers and fruit. But in general, I expected more, to be honest. We also have some food photos, which are probably the best of the bunch. The food wasn't that great, but the photos definitely are. So if you're a food vlogger, you may enjoy this Korean sandwich. It's a Korean beef sandwich. It should have some pears here, some cabbage, kimchi, and beef. Okay, with that being said, pretty nice graffiti here in Bucharest. Ultra-wide version of it. You can see color differences have appeared. And an old-timey phone is also here. By the way, nice indoor shots, and the outdoors weren't that impressive. I would place them a bit below the Nothing Phone 1. These are the photos. If you want to talk about the videos, we have plenty, and let's check them out. So we have this player here. We have 18 videos, and let's start with the relevant one. This one is a comparison of the focus, close-up and background. We're alternating them, switching between focusing on the background and the foreground in a pretty fast manner. Next up, another relevant test is obviously the stabilization test. Stabilization test number 1, 4K, no gimmicks, no ultra steady mode applied, because yes, we do have an ultra steady mode. I mean, it's pretty smooth and all, but I do see some vibration and trepidation of the image behind the center of the clip. And this is the second test where I actually activated ultra steady mode. It's limited to full HD, 60 frames per second. And believe it or not, I actually do not enjoy this. I feel that the previous one was better stabilized, even though this is supposed to be the ultra steady mode. We have a lot of selfie videos because I actually felt the need to use them. We use that bokeh flare feature, where the things behind me tend to get all glittery and shiny. That's the idea of the bokeh flare. The wind was pretty strong. There was also a bit of a drizzle, but still the microphone handled it like a champ and caught my voice. This is the AI color effect. Black and white background, me in color. By the way, nice facial texture and a nice way of doing selfie capture, even though it's not very well stabilized, sadly. Too bad, because the face texture is quite fine. And if you want colors, where we also have that here, plenty of colors. The image is crisp, there's a lot of detail, but I don't feel that thing I was feeling when I was filming with the Nothing phone recently, or the OnePlus Nord 2T. Not sure you could fool someone that this is a flagship level camera. That's the problem I have here, but once again it was a rainy day with a drizzle, so that may also count. Okay, we're done with the daytime photos. Let's see some nighttime ones. We have this one here, for example. The lights of the cars are a bit overblown for me. The colors are quite fine. There's no ghosting when panning. The image is clear, but I did feel that in some instances the yellow hue of the lights turned to green almost. It's not a bad nighttime capture, don't get me wrong. The problem is that I've seen better on other phones. So there's that. And of course the lights. This is the ultra steady mode in full HD, and once again the lights are amplified, but I do enjoy the yellows of the cabs and the overall clarity of my filming. Too bad for the shakiness and the vibration of the image caused by the movement. Okay, so that's that as far as the camera is concerned. Place it in your mind somewhere around the Motorola Edge 30, Honor 70 and Nothing Phone 1. Connectivity wise, this is a dual SIM phone, dual nano SIM with 5G and Wi-Fi 6, USB-C 2.0 at the bottom. There's NFC and even Bluetooth 5.3, which is an advantage of the CPU on board here. Now, GPS dual band should probably also be mentioned, and I also enjoy the quality of the calls, plus some pretty impressive results. Check out the 5G result. 966 MB/s in download, 147 MB/s in upload. I would say quite fine. Wi-Fi 877 over, this is actually 5G. Wi-Fi is 806 over 822 MB/s download and upload. I would say we're doing fine all around. Now, software-wise, if you've seen an OPPO phone recently, well, you've seen them all. It has ColorOS 12.1 on top of Android 12. This is the news feed to the leftmost area. And as usual for an OPPO phone, there's a lot of customization options for the icons. You can definitely see them here, and you can even customize them. Of course, the customization applies to more levels, including themes and so forth. You also have your widgets here, layout, transitions, and more. These are the widgets. We don't have the stacked approach yet, which has been seen on Samsung's recent One UI 5. This is the drop-down section with the notifications and quick settings. Pretty intense greens here. Of course, a sidebar. If you want to do some extra multitasking aside from the split screen, you have the option to drag and enlarge or make the window smaller. And here you have the recents area for your multitasking needs. For security, I actually resorted to face unlock, even though there's a fingerprint scanner in the screen and it's quite snappy. If you want to enter the settings, where there are the core options here, this is the customization area. We also have always on display. You can do some tweaks here. Colors, font, fingerprint animation, and edge lighting, display and brightness, password and security. There's the privacy area, which includes a privacy dashboard, which was one of the core features in Android 12. Location, battery, special features, which include split screen, flexible windows, quick launch. This one is actually dragging your finger up from the fingerprint area when you unlock the screen to trigger various apps via shortcuts. Smart sidebar, kit space, simple mode, and of course, digital well-being and parental control. You can also assign some extra RAM from here, virtual RAM, up to 5 gigs. There are 2 useful apps pre-installed, actually more of them, but 2 of them stand out. This is the Games app. You have some interesting features here, including a special side menu which lets you choose a performance mode, 4D vibration, and more things. You can even see the temperature, resolution, and block accidental touches. The other one is related to performance and should be here somewhere. I keep losing it. This is the phone manager. It includes a bunch of tools and useful optimization features. You can find them here. Pay protection, emergency call, app lock, private save, etc. There's also an app here called O Relax. It's for meditation and breathing and relaxing. And I would say that's about it as far as this phone is concerned. I think we have reached the time of the verdict for the OPPO Reno8 Pro. So let me start with the pros. It's a cute and premium feeling and looking phone for sure. It's got a powerful processor inside, a very bright screen, good video playback time, and I'm talking about the battery, obviously. Aside from that, fast charge, good volume and bass for the dual speakers. I would also say that the OS is customizable, which is a big plus for it. Plus the fact that we have leading bokeh flare effect on the market. Nothing beats it when it comes to that. Very fast connectivity, OK night mode, pretty detailed 4K filming, and great close-ups and colors captured with the main camera. Also, selfies aren't that bad, especially the focus, since we have autofocus here. Those are the pros. On the cons, I have to admit that it's a slippery phone. It's long and wide. The PC Mark result was underwhelming. There is no IP certification, no microSD, no wireless charging. Stabilization was a bit below my expectations, and I feel that the sound gets noisy when you listen to heavy metal at top volume. Also, the selfie videos, I somehow expected a bit more from them for some reason. Now, aside from that, I should probably also mention that the device has a pretty poor ultra-wide and macro camera compared to the Nothing phone, for example, which doesn't have a macro, if I'm being totally honest. The phone is quite pricey in several areas of the world, and I also feel that the zoom is underwhelming, but without a telephoto camera, this was to be expected. In the end, it's definitely clear what this device can fight. Honor 70, Motorola Edge 30 Pro even, Nothing phone and OnePlus Nord 2T. The problem is, those are cheaper than this handset because they were launched earlier. This came a bit later, especially in Europe, and at an even higher price than I mentioned before, which may become a problem. The thing is that it's supposed to be a flagship killer, and I'm not sure it kills any flagships. I'm not sure it even kills the older OnePlus 9 or OnePlus 9 Pro, for example, which definitely are able to film better than this phone. That's a certainty. I mean, if it gets down to $500 or even $600, we may talk about it as an alternative. In the meantime, nobody can say anything bad about its CPU and screen. Those two are heavy hitters. The main camera is also good, but the rest, not very sure that it's able to leave a mark. It's probably going to be bought for the design, which is definitely good looking and pretty premium build. But when it comes to the cameras, in my mind, I had a whole different expectation coming from a solid, in some regards, OPPO Find X5 Pro. I didn't feel that the Mari silicone thing really paid off as they promoted it. That's it from gsn.com. Goodbye.